Hello and welcome back to Karma Stories. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into a different subreddit. It is r/TraumatizeThemBack. And I have 7 stories for you today because I really enjoyed this subreddit and just kept recording and recording and recording. What that resulted in is a 30-minute episode, longer than I normally do. So I hope you enjoy today's extended Traumatize Them Back episode. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Impressive Walrus 87. When your boss has the situational awareness of a fruit fly. I've been lurking here for a while and thought of something that happened a few years back at my old job and thought I would share with the class. It's nothing too out there, but darn did it give me some satisfaction after the fact. This is something that truly satisfied me to my bones and I want to set the scene for everyone reading. In 2020, I, female 19, worked in retail during peak Rona outbreak. I was an overnight stalker at a grocery store and often worked in cold areas, so I was frequently left alone to work. We had recently gotten a new boss, and just for chuckles and tradition, we called her Karen, female 50s. Just to get a feel for Karen, she was a micromanager. Obviously, we all had to wear face masks for health purposes. I worked in a cooler and had a coworker in there with me. The fans were pretty loud, so he and I had to talk over them to hear each other, and the masks muffling our words didn't help much. The thing about Karen is, she has a heavy lisp, partially due to having braces, no judgment, and a very nasally voice, and she has a tendency to mumble. When she came into the cooler, she began talking to us, and we understood absolutely nothing due to the fans and her mumbling and speech impediment. We had to ask her to repeat herself a couple of times because she would not speak up, nor were we allowed to exit the cooler. And she got mad and pulled her mask down to scream at us. Basically, our whole overnight team couldn't stand her or her attitude. Now, on to the actual story. My grandma died in August of 2020, not due to COVID. We were extremely close and I saw her on her deathbed when I went to see her in the hospital. It was a miracle they even let me in, but I was grateful they did because that was the last time I got to see her alive, and she was already cold to the touch. She had taken a sudden turn for the worse and was gone by the next morning. Her death hit me really hard, and eventually I had gone into a drug and alcohol bender. And honestly, I'm shocked I didn't end up hospitalized myself. I'm happy to say that stuff is well behind me, but it's mentioned to emphasize how hard of a time I was going through. My job allowed 3 paid days off for bereavement, so I was waiting until her service to take it and take a couple days after to mentally regroup. My mom had been texting me that evening, talking details, hard conversations, but they had to be had, you know? I was out on the sales floor stocking bacon and left to my own thoughts. I eventually started to tear up because the day of her service was getting closer, and it was just a really hard time for me. All of my bosses were made aware of my loss, and they were all very understanding that I wasn't going to be operating at 100% because my mind just wasn't in it. Except Karen. Karen had been walking around, breathing down people's necks, as usual, and she finally came around to me. She started bitching about my cart not being done. I was still within cold chain and had been out there with it for no longer than 10 minutes. I also had to rotate everything I was putting out because first in, first out when it comes to food. So there was really no reason to snap at me when I was still moving at a pretty decent pace. The thing about me is I am not confrontational, but I do not take kindly to yelling due to CPTSD. I will probably cry or be angry in silence and just sit there and take it. Overall, I was a very quiet and kind of timid person at that point in my life. Karen began grabbing boxes and passive-aggressively stalking less than 2 feet away from me, because screw the 6-foot rule, I guess, and noticed I had tears rolling down my face. She looked at me and said, "What's wrong with you?" I wiped my eyes with my sleeve and kept working. I'm thinking about my Nana. Her funeral is in a couple days, and I have to pick out flowers for her casket. Her birthday was supposed to be in 2 weeks, I replied. Karen actually huffed at me, and I looked up just in time to see her rolling her eyes at me. "Well, just don't think about that. It's not hard," she snapped. I kinda stared at her for a second, not really able to believe she just said that to me. I wanted to slap the metal out of her mouth. Instead, I slammed my box down and walked away and went to the bathroom and sat on the floor to have a good cry and just gather myself and calm down. A coworker witnessed the interaction and came in to check on me, but left after a couple minutes so I could just have a moment alone. After my bereavement, I came back to work and I was a little quieter and steered clear of Karen. Just looking at her instantly made my blood boil now, but when forced to interact, I pretended nothing had happened and continued to be polite. Another thing about me is that I use humor to cope with trauma and pain. This is important for this next part. Fast forward a couple weeks and on my day off, I came in to shop with a friend. We had gone to the garden center and picked out a beautiful orchid for my grandma for her birthday. I was still celebrating because it's what she would have wanted, and she loved orchids. As I was walking towards the front checkout, I was admiring the orchid when I heard that nasally nails on the chalkboard voice, Karen. "Oh, getting an orchid, huh? How pretty." She was standing next to our boss, her supervisor. Karen had her mask pulled down like a chin strap so she could drink her water, but hadn't pulled it back up. "Yeah, it's for my Nana," I replied happily. I was trying to stay positive, and I knew Nana would have loved what I picked out. It's important to note that Karen's supervisor was also aware of my grandmother's death, and had even given me this really sweet memory box before I went on bereavement, and a note offering condolences from the store. It was really nice, and the box was made of wood and leather. "Well, I hope she can keep it alive. Those things die quick," Karen said. She kinda said it with a little laugh that irritated me. Her supervisor turned to her. Before he could say one singular word, I spoke without thinking. "Well, considering she couldn't even keep herself alive, I don't think that's gonna be her cross to bear," I said. I had absolutely zero emotion in my voice. My friend and I continued walking to the front, and in passing, I saw her supervisor's eyes get really big while Karen stood there, opening and closing her mouth like a fish. I think I heard a strangled little "oh" come out of her. My friend was holding her breath until we got far enough away and just started laughing. Eventually, I heard Karen's boss had chewed her out for being insensitive towards her employees after he found out about our interaction a couple weeks prior, and he just doubled down on her after her comment about the flowers. After all that, she at least pretended to somewhat care about the employees and their struggles. She retired a year later anyway, and now sells life insurance. Was my response petty? Yes. Do I regret it? Absolutely not. I ended up staying with that company for 5 years and promoting to management, and it was bosses like her that made me hell-bent on being better and prioritizing my team's mental and physical well-being over numbers. And my team thrived because they knew they had someone in their corner that genuinely cared about them. F you, Karen. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Either Coconut. It says, "I'm sorry for the loss of your grandma. Even years later, it can be hard. Managers who prioritize their team members as human beings over numbers will probably see better numbers anyway, because everyone's going to have much better morale. So that's a double win." You know, some people are just incredibly insensitive to any situation, and that sounds like this Karen fits into that category. I'm guessing she's never lost anybody really close to her and doesn't understand how OP feels right now. Either that or she's just devoid of emotion completely, which is also entirely possible. This story comes to us from the amazing Thunder C. "I don't think you can help me, miss. I need to speak to a man in your department." Any woman who has ever worked in a call center has had this customer. The guys at call centers know these people exist, but for obvious reasons are never on the receiving end of their BS. There's usually not much a girl can do to deal with them, and usually we don't have the time or inclination to argue with them. Some mean old woman calls in wanting something simple, but she is convinced my tiny lady brain can't handle it. I don't know why, but women seem as likely to pull this crap as men in my experience. This woman asks to speak to one of my male colleagues instead. Now, normally, this is where you explain politely yet condescendingly that about 70% of your average call center employees are women, and that we don't index our phone lines by the contents of the employee's underpants. So while we can transfer them back to the queue to try a different rep, they'll have to wait in line again, and may or may not get someone who can sign their name in the snow with a stream of urine. Most of the time, they reluctantly accept the fact that they have to deal with a woman this time. This woman didn't. So I sent her back into the queue to try her luck again. About 30 minutes later, I get her again. "Thank you for calling. My name is OP. How may I help you today?" She didn't recognize me at first and angrily gave me her name and a complaint about being put on hold by the last woman. I recognized her name and crappy demeanor immediately. So in my best bitchy polite customer service voice said, "Oh, yes, Miss Cuntington, I believe I was the one who spoke to you earlier. I'm sorry you weren't able to be connected to someone more to your liking, but I'll do my best to help you." At this point, she lets out a disgruntled sigh and demands to speak to a man now. It's at this point I should mention, I'm a transgender woman. My phone voice is impeccably femme, thanks to years of phone practice, but I can still drop into my old gravelly baritone pretty easily. In fact, I do the voice change up mid-sentence all the time when I'm telling jokes or stories with my friends, cause it's funny. So without missing a beat, I say, "Thank you for calling. My name is OP. How may I help you today?" She paused for a moment, befuddled. "You're the same person," she exclaims, with the same accusatory tone that Jonah Jameson would have used if he figured out Peter Parker was Spider-Man. "Yes, but you wanted to talk to a man." You can hear the gears in her brain grinding to a halt for a moment, then angrily, "What, are you some sort of tranny?" To which I replied cheerfully, like she just noticed my new haircut, "Why yes, how did you know?" To that, she just yelled a slur and hung up. I've heard many stories like this from my 8 years of working in call centers, and they usually turned out kind of the same way, where they were told they had to deal with the person they were talking to, or they just weren't going to get the help that they needed. Unfortunately, in call centers, you're really not allowed to say what you think to the customer. You can't turn it back around on them and say, "Oh, well, I kind of feel the same way, so I don't want to speak to you. Could you put on the man of the house instead?" This story comes to us from Disabled Doll. "Eat your vegetables and leave me out of it." For context, I am allergic to broccoli and spinach. It's bad enough that I avoid restaurants that serve those veggies steamed because a cloud of that steam anywhere near me causes hives, gastric distress, etc. My parents were both divorced and remarried to incredibly strict people. For some reason, the step-parents were typically in charge of dinner time. There was neglect, but that's a big can of worms. And were very strict around vegetables. I remember a time my stepdad dumped a can of spinach onto a plate, did not heat it up or remove the water, and served it for dinner. He's an all-around POS, so when I refused to eat that, I would be berated and beaten. I always knew I couldn't eat broccoli or spinach because in the past it would cause me to throw up pretty much immediately. I often went without food at all since I didn't eat my vegetables. The smells from cooking made me nauseous and wheezy, and we had to ask for permission to have a snack. You already know how that went for me. Since high school, I've been 5'6" and only weighed 90 to 95 pounds the first 3 years. I was even a late bloomer due to being functionally malnourished my entire childhood. For example, I didn't get any acne until I was almost 18. Context out of the way, I started seeing a new physical therapist a few years ago. Every doctor-type office asks about allergies, so I wrote down broccoli, spinach, and some other things. When PT approached me with the paperwork, she asked, "Are you actually allergic to broccoli and spinach, or did you just say that to get out of eating it like my kids?" I felt waves of memories come flooding back and turned cold inside. I was now deadpan. Are you like my parents, who assume children lie all the time and force them to eat things, even when life-threatening allergic reaction symptoms are present? She never brought it up again. I hope that led to an important conversation with her family about food preferences. Even if her kids would lie about something like that, in my opinion, that means she should try a different recipe, or stop lying to her kids and teaching them to lie consequently. I highly doubt that adding seasoning to vegetables reduces any nutritional value. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Duet Masaki. It says, "My daughter is allergic to berries. We got her tested for allergies because we noticed that her face would get red and puffy after she ate them. Same thing with dogs and cats. She can't resist petting animals, so that's why we had Benadryl on hand all the time. Your parents' neglect at the time is horrific, and I hope you're low or no contact with them." OP responded and said, "I only talk to my 2 brothers and my mother's mom out of my entire family. I do see my dad maybe once or twice a year, but he doesn't really reach out or respond, besides random texts just saying love you. that my brothers and I receive at the same time, every time, and that we had all considered concerning before realizing it was a pattern. Anyway, I went out to dinner to see my dad and brothers alone together for the first time in who knows how long. The brother I adore and myself were playing paper football in the empty restaurant, and ended up making paper airplanes to fly through the field goal instead, since it's more fun. I threw my plane first and put up the field goal for my brother to send it back, but when he did, I flinched excessively hard. It's something I haven't been able to break yet, but I have come a long way from flinching turning into full panic. My brother said, "You can't flinch that hard, you saw it coming." So I replied, "I grew up with these two," pointing to and now including my dad and the one with the God complex in the conversation. "And you think I won't flinch regardless?" The new conversation participants verbally validated what I said. The elephant in the room will always be hidden for them, and I really effing worry about my brother's kids sometimes. Can we just jump back to the physical therapist who asks OP if they are lying like their own kids saying they don't like eating vegetables? If I'm not mistaken, the proper way for somebody in healthcare to ask about something like that is to say, "Oh, what are your reactions to these triggers?" From the response, they can then decide whether it sounds like an allergy or something else, but you don't write out say, "Oh, what is this? I think you're lying." OP, I really do think you should consider cutting out the people who are toxic in your life completely. I know you went out for dinner with them, but you probably don't even need to do that if it's gonna keep bringing back the past. Cut them out, go to therapy, and move on with your life. This story comes to us from Violets and Dragons, Scary Mode. So this is a very short story, but I'm feeling pretty satisfied about it. Basically, I was at the Ren Fair with a couple of friends, and me and my closest friend had been separated from the other two. We went into a shop and there were real, incredibly well-constructed, beautiful corsets. Now, I love corsets, but they aren't in my budget at the moment, and probably won't be for another couple years. So I said to my friend, "These are beautiful. It's a shame I'd never be able to afford them." Just then, two teenage boys appeared from seemingly out of nowhere, but actually from behind a rack of clothes. They were looking at us with those predatory looks I usually only see in the eyes of grown men. Like they're about to jump us. A bad start to say the least. Now, in my Ren Fair outfit, smiling and laughing with my friend, leaning on my cane, I probably look like an easy target. So one of the boys says, "These corsets are so pretty, which one do you think would look the best on me?" Now, if he wasn't giving that creepy look, I would have answered him, but he was, so I just stared back at him. His friend said something creepy that I don't remember. I remember after he said it, my friend walked away disgusted. Now, I've been told all my life I have a horrifying energy about me. No one has a good first impression of me because unless I really try not to be, I'm intimidating. I have terrified grown men. I'm certainly not scared of two boys. So when the first boy blocked my path with a wide, erratic motion, I looked at him, turning into my horrifying energy, and I asked loudly, full of deep rage, "Do you mind?" I thought I was being pretty calm, but my voice did drop an octave. I was prepared for a full confrontation. I thought we'd have a bit of back and forth before I actually managed to scare them off. But he just stood up awkwardly and looked down and said, "No, sorry ma'am," and he and his friend literally ran away. I saw them headed towards the exit, so I'm pretty sure they left the Ren Fair. My friend was telling our other friends about the story and misremembered it as me fully cursing them out. So I must have been a bit more scary than I meant to. Anyway, I just thought that was a funny story you guys might enjoy, even if it is really small and truly unintentional. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called I'm Not Kate. It says, "Absolutely beautiful. I hope the boys actually learned that what they did was not okay. Maybe, just maybe, they will behave better in the future." I feel like OP is definitely the protector of their group and a wonderful person to be around until someone turns them the wrong way. I am saddened by this story though because you know it wasn't the boys' first time trying to intimidate some woman, and it probably won't be the last either. They didn't really get put in their place, they were just told to move on once. Like OP said though, I do hope this interaction makes them think about what they're doing. This story comes to us from Aurora Rising 0721, holding a narcissistic grandfather accountable. My 87-year-old grandfather is the most unaccountable person I have ever met. During a visit a few months ago, he said that if he ever hurt anyone that he was unaware of, that he would want to know so he could apologize. I presented him with an opportunity to do so in that moment, and wouldn't you know it, turns out he has no intention to own his part at all ever. He brought in all kinds of unrelated things, deflecting, defending, demeaning, dismissing, etc., including myself, his granddaughter, who he decided in his prideful state that I was crazy, a nutcase, and nothing but a woman who is full of herself. I'm not someone who seeks to hurt people. I am not malicious or vindictive, but I will tell you right now, this man is, and I have watched him be a bully my whole life. His deep insecurities about himself have fueled his cruelty towards his family, and I had enough. So I looked him square in the eyes after he had insulted pretty much everyone in the family, creating emotional chaos, all because he can't simply acknowledge his part. And I said, "You can call me whatever you want, but the truth is that you did nothing to protect my mother when she was younger, and she may be afraid of you, but I'm not. The truth is that you are illiterate and you can't read, and you feel stupid, so you make everyone else around you feel stupid to feel better about yourself. You are a bully and a coward." So yeah, I said it, and I meant it. Under no circumstances will I ever tolerate someone who demands all this respect and gives none in return. This man is not a grandfather. He is a large child who has no empathy or compassion for anyone except for himself. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called MissMellow420. It says, "Go ahead with your bad self. I'm so effing proud of you. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when you said that. What did he say?" OP responded and said, "I appreciate the encouragement. Even though I was proud of myself for standing up to him, it was still a really tough day. After my comeback, he stood up and wanted me to leave, but not without telling me I better leave while I'm still alive. It wasn't a real threat, it's just the only thing he knows how to do. It's really sad and deeply disappointing. I was standing up for my mom and for other family members who weren't there at the time." This grandfather is the kind of person that later in life is sitting in a nursing home staring at a wall, wondering why nobody comes in to visit them. Because they've been so nice to everybody through their whole life, why isn't anybody being nice to them? Oh buddy, enjoy those walls you put up, cause that's all you're gonna see. This story comes to us from Amazing Tangelo 271, Too Young to Be Disabled. So I am 38 female. This happened loads of times to me, but this is the one that annoyed me the most. I was about 31 and I was on my way to my doctor's appointment. So I drove myself there like normal and parked in the designated disabled space at the end of the street. I have a disabled badge and a disabled parking disc. This is clearly on display on my dashboard for any parking wardens that may come by. All of a sudden, a car pulls up behind me and pulls really close to my bumper. This made me worry about getting out after my appointment, especially since there is no spaces behind the one I was in. The next thing I know, there is a loud, frantic tapping on my window. This gives me a small heart attack because it was literally like something from a horror movie. Outside my window was an elderly woman who looked to be in her 70s. She was knocking on my window non-stop. I rolled down my window to see what she was needing, and before I even got a chance to open my mouth, she starts yelling at me. "How dare you park in this spot? This is a disabled spot. My husband needs this spot for his doctor's appointment, so you need to move now. It's absolutely disgusting that young people these days have no respect for anything." I looked at her for a moment completely dumbfounded, and because I didn't say anything for a second, she started on a tirade the second time. This time I stopped her, and I said that I also needed the space. I am disabled. If she looked at my dashboard, she would see my disabled badge. This seemed to send her off the deep end. "That's not your badge. You must have stolen that badge. You're too young to be disabled." Something in me snapped at that point. I took my badge off the dash and showed her my picture on the back. I then told her to step back from my door. Now, I can kinda walk on crutches on a good day, but on my bad days, I have to rely on my wheelchair. On the seat beside me, I had both in case I needed them. It was one of my better days, so I could have used the crutches, but this lady had really pissed me off at this time. So I may have exaggerated every single movement of getting the chair out of the car and assembled. And I may have made some extra pain noises transferring from the car to the chair. It always hurts me because of one of my conditions, but I may have put some extra flair in to be a butthole. This lady watched me in horror the whole time. She didn't offer to help. To be honest, she seemed so horrified, I doubt she could have if she wanted to. So I closed the car door and looked her dead in the eyes and went, "Am I disabled enough for you?" Her face was white. Any color was completely gone. Before wheeling myself away, I told her she should be ashamed of herself. She was the one with no manners and respect. It doesn't matter how old you are, a disability doesn't discriminate, unlike you just did. On that note, she scurried back to her car as fast as she could, promptly reversed from the back of my car, and drove off rather hurriedly. As I said, this happened a lot in my life, even as recently as last month, but this was the one that I couldn't keep my emotions in check. Thanks for reading my long story. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we do have one from a deleted account. It says, "That's the neat thing about disability. It can happen to anyone at any time, and it's not always obvious. People are jerks. My friend had a stroke at 36, and the way strangers treated her was horrendous. An unfortunate eye-opener." OP responded and said, "I'm so sorry to hear that happen to your friend. I hope that they're making good progress now. Being disabled doesn't always just affect the person, it can also impact their friends and family. It's that familial instinct to want to protect them in any way you can, and when you see what it does to your person, it also chips away at you. And I think that's a big thing people forget, or that's what it's like for me anyway. But to the person, knowing you have your chosen people can be the best feeling in the world." The really unfortunate thing is that a lot of old people seem to think that the disability badge is more of a pensioner's badge instead of an actual disability thing. I fully agree with OP putting these people in their place whenever they have the opportunity to do so, because if they're just ignored, they will keep on doing this to other people. They need to be told. This story comes to us from Darf Poopy. "Don't wiggle the needle." I was watching The Click and this popped into my mind. Back in 2018, I was 43 male. I needed blood work done the day before my hernia surgery. I have a major issue, the vasovagal reaction. Blood outside my body doesn't bother me. I can clean up a bad cut or nosebleed without issue. But when it's being actively taken, instant dizziness, nausea, and the whole room turns into the Gravitron. I told the phlebotomist this up front. My usual workaround is lying down and having an extra alcohol wipe to smell. Her response was a masterpiece of, "Yeah, no. We don't have a place for you to lie down, and I can't spare any wipes." Okay, fine. I was seated at a table and figured I'd try to tough it out since the blood work was mandatory, and I really wanted to get this surgery over and done with. She got the needle in and started drawing. 5 vials were needed. 5. I assumed they were feeding a small hospital vampire. I was doing okay, maybe a little pale and clammy, but holding steady, until the blood flow stopped. She looked confused. I pointed out gently that the tourniquet was still on. She looked me right in the eye and said, "It's supposed to stay in." I was already struggling, and this baffling moment of incompetence pushed me over the edge. At that point, she did the worst thing possible. Instead of, taking the tourniquet off to allow more blood to flow into my arm, she reached across the table and wiggled the needle while it was still in my arm. The second that happened, it was over for me. No amount of white knuckling it could get me through. I instantly went from on the struggle bus to full-on Linda Blair projectile mode. Since I hadn't needed to fast, the massive Denny's feast I'd had on the way in, pancakes, eggs, sausage, and coffee, erupted from me and landed all over her. For anyone who remembers, you can't do that on television, it looked like she just said, "I don't know," but Nickelodeon let the slime go bad. She had multiple warnings. There were multiple points of failure. The tourniquet, the no wipes rule, not letting me lie down, and the final catastrophic error of wiggling a sharp object inside a patient. I didn't feel bad for a second. She had to have someone else come in and deal with the biohazard and the needle in my arm. I walked out after a short recovery rest, feeling completely fine, ready for surgery the next day, and utterly unbothered by the fact that I had just covered a healthcare professional in a breakfast buffet. Moral of the story, listen to your patients. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Dragons Owlite. It says, "Did you tell anyone how cruel and unprofessional she was to you? Wiggling the needle is so unsafe. She has no business in her job with how incompetent she was. OP responded and said, honestly, I was too focused on the surgery to even think about it. Let's take a quick look at this one because there were 3 very clear points of failure here. The first was ignoring patient history. OP said what their problem was, they got denied completely. Number 2 was the tourniquet. If you need more blood flow because it stopped, you remove the tourniquet. It probably should have been taken off after the blood started flowing regardless. Number 3, wiggling the needle. This is the catastrophic error which can cause severe injury to the patient. OP, right at the beginning of this one, when they basically ignored your history, I would have asked for somebody else. Right from the beginning, this was incredibly unprofessional, and that person has no business being around a patient. Alright, we're going to go ahead and end this one here. If you enjoyed this extended 30-minute episode, please let me know in the comments down below if you're on YouTube or on Spotify. I thank each and every one of you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.